Hi, I'm Leona. I'm 67 years old, and 3 months ago, I gave my son $70,000 to save his house from foreclosure. A week later, he changed the locks and told me I still owed him. He said I controlled his life, that everything I gave came with strings. But what do you call it when a mother gives everything and ends up on the sidewalk with nowhere to go? They erased me from their home, their photos, their version of the truth. But the worst part wasn't being locked out. It was realizing I helped build the door they used to shut me out. Why would a son do that to his mother? And how many others have lived through the same silence? The phone rang just after sunset, the kind of call that rattles something in your chest before you even pick it up. I remember the way my fingers trembled as I answered, even before I heard Travis's voice. It was rushed, panicked. He barely said hello. "Mom, it's bad. The bank. They're going to take the house. I don't know what to do." I didn't need him to explain. I knew what bad meant in his voice. I'd heard it when he was 16 and wrecked his first car, when he was 23 and flunked out of college. And now, at 38, the weight in his words was heavier, more desperate. They said if I don't pay by Friday, they'll start foreclosure. It's 70 grand, but I swear I can pay you back. 70,000! That number should have made me pause. Instead, I felt my chest tighten. Not with fear, but instinct. A mother's instinct. No matter how old your child gets, no matter how many lines cross the calendar, your heart still jumps to protect them. "Okay," I said too quickly. "Okay, we'll figure it out." I hung up, walked to my bedroom, and pulled the drawer where my retirement folders sat. It took less than 2 hours to liquidate what I'd built over 35 years of working at the Spokane Public Library. That night, I clicked transfer on $70,000, and I did it with no hesitation. Because he was my son, my only child. And that house, that red brick 2-story, had once been a place where he learned to ride his bike, where I patched up scraped knees, where Christmas lights still haunted my memory in early November. A day later, Travis texted, "Got it. Thank you. Seriously, Mom, you saved us." Us. That word hurt more than I expected. I packed a small overnight bag, not because I thought they needed me to, but because I thought it'd be nice to spend a night helping them organize bills, maybe cook dinner, catch up like families used to. When I arrived with groceries in hand, the house looked exactly the same, but something in the air felt thinner. That's when I saw her. Ophalie. She didn't smile when she opened the door. Her lips were tight, polite. Travis wasn't home yet. "Is it okay if I leave these in the fridge?" I asked, lifting the bag slightly. She nodded, stepping aside but not inviting. "Sure, but just so you know, things have been a little tense. Travis and I need space right now." I paused. "Of course, I won't stay long." A few days later, I returned to drop off the utility receipt. It was cold, Spokane cold, late winter wind sliding down your collar. I pulled my coat tighter and reached for my key. It didn't fit. I tried again. Jiggled the lock. Nothing. I knocked. Moments later, Travis opened the door just wide enough to slip through. He didn't look surprised. "Hey, Mom." "Travis?" I held up the paper. "I came to give you this, but my key doesn't—" "Yeah," he cut in, avoiding my eyes. "We had the locks changed." Silence. My throat closed. What?" "It's not personal," he said, like that would make it better. "It's just, Ophalie and I need boundaries. It's our home now. We're trying to move forward, build something just ours." The groceries, the late-night call, the $70,000. My name wasn't just absent, it was erased. Ophalie appeared behind him, arms crossed. I said nothing. I stepped back, nodded once. "Thanks for the update," I managed. My voice didn't break, but something inside did. They didn't stop me as I walked down the front steps. No one followed. I stood at the curb, holding my overnight bag in one hand and a paper receipt in the other. It was quiet except for the wind through the bare trees. I didn't call a cab. I took the bus. I wanted the time, the stillness, the movement without explanation. That night, I checked into a roadside motel near Division Street. The clerk didn't ask why a gray-haired woman with a wheeled suitcase needed a single room with no return date. I sat on the edge of the bed, coat still on, and stared at the wall. My mind replayed the confirmation email like a cruel joke. Payment received, $70,000. Mortgage secured. I'd saved their house, and they locked me out of it. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel. I just opened my notebook, the old one I used for recipes, grocery lists, budget lines, and wrote, Feb 7th, the day I stopped being a mother. 3 days after they changed the locks, I stood on that same porch, this time without groceries, without a bag. I didn't even bring my notebook, just my coat, zipped all the way up, and a simple question that had been pounding in my chest like a second heartbeat. Why? It was around 5, the sky already dimming into that dull Spokane gray, where the wind smells like old wood and frozen soil. The porch creaked beneath my boots as I waited. A few lights were on inside, enough to show they were home. I knocked twice. I didn't expect a hug or an apology. I just wanted a sliver of explanation, a crack in the wall. Travis opened the door. His face didn't shift when he saw me. No surprise, no guilt. Mom. I met his eyes. Can I ask why? He didn't answer right away. He stepped outside, gently pulled the door halfway behind him, like I was someone selling insurance. Look, this isn't easy. Neither was wiring you my retirement, I said. He looked at the ground. You always made things about you. Everything we did growing up. You hovered. You controlled. You smothered. You never let me breathe. The words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just rejection anymore. It was rewriting. I was a kid, Mom, and I needed space. You wouldn't give it. And now, after all these years, you're still trying to run my life. Money doesn't fix that. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. You asked for help. He shook his head. No, I told you what was happening. You offered, like always. You make sacrifices and then expect gratitude like a paycheck. I stood still. For a moment, the street disappeared. The chill vanished. All I could hear was that line, echoing louder than traffic. You owe me more than you know. I couldn't tell if it was anger or grief that bubbled in my chest. Maybe both. But I didn't let either speak. Instead, I turned. No words. No performance. I walked down the steps with the poise of someone who's spent a lifetime swallowing blame. At the corner, I paused at the stop sign. Not for traffic, there wasn't any, but because my legs wouldn't move. In my mind, scenes rolled in like a home movie. His 3rd birthday party, when I stayed up past midnight baking a lopsided cake with dinosaur sprinkles. The time I spent 2 hours convincing the ER to treat his sprained wrist before insurance cleared. The day he called at 2 a.m. from a party in high school, too drunk to speak straight, and I drove across town in slippers just to pick him up without scolding him. Had I controlled him? Or did I just show up every time he needed someone to? I never saw those choices as power. I saw them as love. I walked home. I didn't take the bus. I needed the air, the distance, the silence between steps. Back in my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the framed confirmation email I'd printed last week. Transfer successful. $70,000 to First Evergreen Mortgage Company. I had put it in a frame, not because I wanted praise, but because I believed it would mean something. Proof that when the story was told, I wouldn't be left out. I grabbed the frame, pulled the backing off, and tore the paper in half. Then I went to my phone and opened the emergency contact list. Travis's name sat at the top, where it had been since phones started storing names instead of numbers. I deleted it. I didn't cry. There were no theatrics, no soundtrack swelling in the background. Just the quiet click of a decision too long delayed. If this is what it costs to be a mother, I whispered, I've paid enough. And still, they wanted to rewrite the story without me. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the text came through. Simple, casual, like someone forwarding a grocery coupon. It was from Denise, a former coworker from the library. "Have you seen Ophilie's latest post?" I didn't respond right away. Denise wasn't one for gossip, which meant if she was sending this, it wasn't fluff. I opened Facebook, even though I hadn't touched it since deleting Travis's number. There it was. A photo of the porch. My porch. The one I'd paid to have re-leveled and repainted last year when the foundation started cracking. They were standing on it. Ophelie with her hand on Travis's chest, his arm around her shoulder, both smiling. The caption read, "It's been a long road, but we rebuilt this house with nothing but love and hard work." Love and hard work. I stared at those words so long, I forgot to blink. The comments poured in underneath. "You two are such an inspiration. Proof that young people can still build something real." "Y'all did this without help? That's amazing." Not a single mention of me. No reference to the fact that just weeks earlier, I'd drained nearly every dime I had to keep that roof over their heads. My hands didn't shake from anger. Not at first. It was something else. Something hollower. They weren't just pretending I didn't exist. They were replacing me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, thinking about the night Travis called. Not just called, begged. It was after midnight. The heater had kicked off again in my building, and I was curled up under 2 blankets with a book when the phone rang. "Mom?" His voice was tight, thin. "I messed up. I should have seen this coming. They're gonna take the house. If they foreclose, it's over for me. I can't start again, not at my age. I'm scared." He didn't ask directly, but the plea was all over his voice, raw and wet with panic. And now he stood grinning on a porch I'd saved, pretending he built it from scratch with his wife, like a magazine-ready couple who made it without help. I closed the app. Then I deleted the whole profile. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I wasn't going to watch them scrub me from their lives like a smudge. I got up, turned on the light, and opened the bottom drawer where I kept the receipts. The paperwork. The screenshot of the mortgage company email. I added the photo of the porch. Saved the post before it disappeared. They were curating fiction, so I started curating facts. I printed out every transfer slip, every message, even the call logs. I didn't know yet what I would do with it all, but something told me I'd need proof one day, not to defend myself, but to remember. I sat down at the table with all the pages spread around me. There was a moment of eerie calm, like I was assembling pieces of someone else's life. A life where I had played a central role, only to be cut from the final version. I whispered out loud to no one. They want a story without me, so I'll keep the one that's true. I went to bed late that night. Didn't dream. Woke up early and kept going. Not angry, not sad, just aware. They were building a narrative, but even fiction leaves fingerprints, and someone had screenshots. The envelope came on a Thursday morning, thin and sharp like a paper cut waiting to happen. At first, I thought it was another insurance summary or one of those cheerful AARP newsletters I never asked for. But the sender's name on the return address froze me. A law firm. Not one I recognized. Not one I'd ever needed, until now. Inside, the letter was written in that flat, pleasant language lawyers use to soften the blow. This letter confirms the legal transfer of property at 409 W. Larch Avenue. The undersigned, Leona Shipman, has relinquished all rights of ownership and occupancy. I stared at my name, printed so cleanly on a document I didn't remember agreeing to. At least not like this. My fingers clenched the paper, not from surprise, but clarity. I remembered the afternoon I signed what Travis called a support document. He said it was needed to adjust some mortgage paperwork. We were at the kitchen table. Ophelie was boiling water for tea, but never made eye contact. Travis slid the paper toward me with a pen and a half smile. I didn't even read all of it. I wanted to believe he was finally trying to handle things like a grown man. But now the truth was in ink. I hadn't just given them my savings. I'd signed away my place in the world we built. I drove to the public records office. I needed to hear it out loud from someone who wasn't paid to smile while they cut me out. The woman behind the desk wore oversized glasses and a cardigan that reminded me of my own closet. She looked at the screen, tapped a few keys, and blinked. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "It's no longer listed under your name. Transfer of title complete. There's no lien or shared claim either." That confirmed it. Not only had they erased me, they made sure I had no path back in. In the restroom down the hall, I stared at my reflection. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the mirror too honest. I pressed my palms against the cold porcelain of the sink, trying to breathe through the wave of nausea building in my stomach. I wasn't just written off, I whispered. I helped write the paper that erased me. Later that evening, while reheating soup in the microwave, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Cressida, my great-niece, the only one in the family who still texted with full sentences. "Auntie Leona, I thought you should see this. Sorry if it hurts." Attached was a screenshot. Travis texting one of his friends. "Once she signs, we're free to sell in 6 months. Hopefully already talked to a realtor." I didn't cry. That part of me had already dried up. What I felt was worse. A steady, scorching burn behind my ribs. This wasn't about family. It was strategy. I wasn't inconvenient. I was calculated. I sat down at my small dining table and pulled out the manila folder I'd started keeping after the eviction. In it were printed bank transfers, voicemail transcripts, Ophelia's Facebook post, and now this screenshot. They had used signatures like scissors. But I had something else. Evidence. I clipped the new screenshot to the growing stack, then opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before typing into the search bar. Legal Aid Spokane Elder Financial Abuse. Within minutes, I found a form. I started filling it out, pausing only to reread each line for accuracy. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. At the bottom of the form, there was a blank field labeled Brief Summary of the Situation. I hesitated, then typed, "I gave them a house. Now I'll take back the truth." I hit save, but didn't send it yet. The first shot was silent. Mine wouldn't be. I took my time that morning, folded laundry, made oatmeal I barely touched. By noon, the manila folder on my table stared back at me like a living thing. It held every scrap I'd gathered. Receipts, screenshots, voicemail transcripts. On top, a USB drive with one file that had haunted me in silence until now. I added one more page. The screenshot Cressida had sent. The text from Travis about selling the house once she signs. As I sealed the folder shut, I said it out loud. Not a declaration, but a confirmation. If they won't tell the truth, I will. There was no rage in my voice, just resolve. I put on my coat and crossed the yard to Maris Gelman's house. She'd been my neighbor for over 2 decades, the kind of woman who always knew which cars belonged on the block and which didn't. We hadn't spoken much since the fallout, not because she chose sides, but because she respected silence. She opened the door with her usual half-smile. "Coffee?" We sat at her kitchen table like we had dozens of times before, this time without small talk. Maris stirred cream into her cup, then looked up. "My grandson mentioned something about Travis," she said gently. I nodded, signaling her to go on. "He told one of his friends at school that you were helping with the money, said once it cleared, they'd have the house to themselves. Didn't sound like a plan. Sounded like a done deal." I didn't flinch, but my stomach turned anyway. "He said it like I was a contractor," I murmured. "Temporary help." Maris reached over and touched my hand. "I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner." "You just did," I said, "and I'm grateful." That night, I attended a backyard birthday party for my cousin's grandson. It was casual, plastic chairs, foil trays of pasta salad, a fire pit someone never lit. I hadn't planned to go, but I needed to be around someone who remembered my name without squinting. I was sipping lukewarm lemonade when I overheard someone 2 chairs down say Travis's name. "He's been through a lot," a woman said. "The mortgage, the stress. And he still showed up for work every day. You gotta admire that kind of grit. I didn't mean to interrupt. I really didn't. But my hand moved to my phone like it had a mind of its own. I have something to share, I said, louder than I meant. The small circle of guests turned. I opened my voice memo app and tapped the file. Travis's voice poured out, raw and frantic. Mom, please. If this house goes, I go down with it. I'm drowning here. I just need a little help. I can fix this, I promise. No one said a word. Even the kids playing tag behind us had gone quiet, as if the audio reached them too. I looked around. That call came at 1:12 in the morning, 3 days before I wired him $70,000. A few people shifted uncomfortably. One older cousin muttered, I thought you left because of the stress. I didn't leave, I said, my voice calm and clear. I was removed. After the party, 2 relatives approached me near the driveway. One hugged me so tightly, I had to pat her back just to breathe. Another whispered, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I nodded. Now you do? When I got home, I took the manila folder from my bag and slid in the printout of the voicemail transcript. The folder was nearly full now. Not with bitterness, but proof. I wasn't collecting evidence to destroy anyone. I wasn't planning revenge. I just wanted the lies to stop echoing louder than the truth. I clipped the folder closed and placed it back in the drawer. But their next move proved they weren't done with me. The first thing I saw when I picked up my phone that morning was a sea of red notifications. Dozens of messages, tags, comments, all pointing to a single Facebook post. I hadn't been on social media since I deleted my account, but apparently, Ophelie hadn't extended the same courtesy. Someone had screenshotted the post and sent it to me through email. The image was old, taken at my 65th birthday. I was mid-sentence, eyes half-blinked, mouth open. One of those unflattering, candid shots no one wants online. She dug deep to find it. The caption read, Sometimes, the people who say they love you the most cause the deepest wounds, especially when they hide behind sacrifice. Below that, a trail of sympathetic comments stacked like dominoes. You're so strong for speaking up. Family can be toxic too. I always knew something seemed off about her. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't gasp or curse. I just sat there, clutching the edge of the kitchen table, letting the weight of it all settle over me. They weren't just rewriting the story. They were distributing it like a public press release, with me cast as the villain. I spent the day in silence. I didn't respond. I didn't defend. But I did gather. I reread every message, took screenshots of every comment, saved them all into a folder. I wasn't going to scream into the void. I was going to make sure the void had a witness. 2 days later, it escalated. It was just after lunch. I'd been sorting papers in the living room when a firm knock rattled the front door. I opened it to find 2 officers, their expressions neutral but unreadable. Mrs. Shipman, one asked, we received a wellness check request. Your son and daughter-in-law were concerned about some recent messages you may have sent. The air left my lungs. What messages? They exchanged a glance. They mentioned you were emotionally unstable and had made some threatening remarks. Do you mind if we come in? I stepped aside. They looked around my apartment, spotless, modest, quiet. On the dining table, my manila folder sat half open, with labeled tabs and a printed affidavit draft. One officer glanced at it. I've been documenting some things, I said plainly. They asked questions. I answered with calm. No yelling, no sobbing, just facts. Still, by the time they left, one of them said gently, It's probably best if we take you for an overnight evaluation, just to clear the report. So they did. The facility wasn't a horror show. It was sterile, quiet, filled with exhausted staff who'd seen too much. I didn't fight. I didn't try to argue my way out. I just asked for a pen. In the intake room, under 2 bright lights and the hum of a vending machine, I wrote, My statement wasn't for the police. It was for me. My version. The facts, the timeline, the receipts. All of it. I wrote until my hand cramped. If they think this will shut me up, I whispered to myself, they forgot who raised them. 23 hours later, they let me go. No signs of instability, no notes of concern. Just a discharge form and a counselor with soft eyes who said, "You're not the first mother this has happened to." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I don't want to be a trend. As I stepped into the fresh air outside, the wind felt different. I wasn't shaken. I wasn't ashamed. I was armed. They'd used pity. They'd used perception. Now I'd use the truth. And I had just the artifact to shatter their script. I found the box outside my door on a Thursday morning. No return label, no handwriting, just a beat-up cardboard thing, damp in one corner from the overnight drizzle. The kind of box you'd use to ship something not worth wrapping. I dragged it inside, already knowing what it was before I opened the first flap. Inside were pieces of my past. Ripped scarves, brittle photos, papers yellowed at the edges, birthday cards with smeared ink, holiday ornaments missing hooks. My name was scribbled in black Sharpie on the side, like I was a donation to Goodwill. At the very bottom, rolled tightly and stuffed without care, was a piece of paper. I pulled it out and flattened it on my kitchen counter. The floor plan. My husband's pencil marks were still faintly visible. Notes he'd made in 1992 about where we'd someday build the sunroom, the kind of wood he wanted for the staircase. His handwriting curled the way it always did at the end of a thought, trailing off like he was whispering to himself. That house wasn't just walls and rooms. It was a blueprint of a life we built, one decision at a time. Beneath the floor plan, tucked inside a broken zipper pouch, was something I hadn't seen in years. His gold chain. The locket I gave him on our 10th anniversary. It still had my photo inside, faded, smiling, from a time when we were young and sure of everything. I hadn't worn it since the day Travis turned 18. That night had been more argument than celebration, and I'd taken it off before going to bed, too tired to pretend joy. Now here it was, dumped among junk like a trinket from a stranger. I held it in my hand for a long time. My first instinct was to toss it, to let it join the pile of old broken things in the hallway trash chute. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe pain, tightened its grip. That evening, just before sunset, I brought out the old metal bowl I used to keep under the sink for soaking dish rags. I lined it with foil, carried it to the small patio behind my apartment, and lit a match. One by one, I dropped things in. Old utility bills addressed to me, but paid for someone else. Christmas cards signed with love from Travis and Ophelie, but missing my name. A printout of the Facebook post that launched their pity parade. The caption still read, "Sometimes the people who say they love you the most cause the deepest wounds." The flames flickered quietly, polite even in their destruction. Then I reached for the floor plan. I held it over the fire, the edges curling just slightly from the heat. But I didn't let go. I couldn't. This wasn't just paper. This was proof that I had built something real, even if they'd tried to erase it. That before their story began, mine had already existed in pencil and promise. I folded it gently and set it aside. Inside, I took the floor plan and the locket and placed them in a fresh manila folder. I labeled it in firm black ink, "For legal review." I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, found the calendar, scheduled a meeting with Reuben Tate for the following Monday. I knew him by reputation, a community legal advisor who didn't scare easy, especially when it came to the kind of stories people didn't believe until it was too late. Before I closed the lid, I glanced again at the folder. "You tried to burn me out of your story," I said aloud, soft but sure. "Now I'll write the ending myself." And I wasn't just coming with words, I was coming with papers. Reuben Tate didn't speak for a full minute after reading the folder. He just sat there, flipping through pages like they were pieces of a puzzle he already saw the edges of. His office smelled faintly of old carpet and peppermint gum. There was a small fan humming behind him, though it didn't help the spring heat creeping through the closed windows. Finally, he looked up. "Leona, this is strong. Very strong, we can act. I nodded once. Not because I needed validation, but because I was ready. I slid the folder closer to him. Proof, property, and pattern. It said in bold black ink across the top. Inside was everything. The mortgage transfer, the text from Travis planning to sell, the voicemail from that night, even the floor plan of the house with my husband's handwriting. Every document, every lie unmasked by a printed timestamp. We spent the next hour crafting the letter. Reuben's fingers moved fast across the keyboard, but he read every sentence aloud. No emotion, just clarity. The letter would be a formal legal inquiry, a notice of potential civil fraud based on misrepresentation and financial exploitation. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet, but it was the warning shot. I signed it with steady hands. The letter went out the next morning, certified mail, to Travis and Ophelia's address. A 14-day response deadline, enough time to make them sweat. 3 days passed before my phone lit up with his name. I didn't answer. The voicemail came a minute later. "Mom, what is this? Are you really trying to ruin me? You know what this could do to my career? To Ophelia's?" I played it twice, saved it to the same archive as the first. He didn't sound angry. He sounded cornered. That night, a text from Ophelia popped up. I didn't even realize she still had my number. "This is going too far. You're our mother," I replied with one sentence. "No, I was your foundation, and now I'm my own." After that, silence. By the weekend, word had begun to spread through the family. Not through me, I didn't post, didn't explain, but through whispers, questions. One cousin called and asked if I had time for coffee. Another sent a private message. "I don't know what to believe anymore, but I want to hear your side." So I told it. Not with bitterness, with receipts. I shared the timeline, the calls, the transfer, the way my name had been quietly stripped from everything I helped build. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't have to. One relative looked at me and said, "I always thought something didn't add up, but you kept so quiet." I smiled. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's patience. On a warm Monday morning, I walked out of the Spokane County Courthouse with a stamped copy of the filed motion tucked into my purse. The clerk had handed it over with a brief nod, the kind that says, "You've done this the right way." Outside, the light was sharp, not cruel, just honest. Like truth itself. They had locked me out of a house. I had unlocked something greater, my name. But some stories don't end with papers. They echo. The folding chairs were lined up in 3 crooked rows, half of them occupied by seniors holding styrofoam coffee cups or notepads they didn't plan to write on. I stood at the edge of the room, looking at the laminated sign taped to the podium. Panel on Elder Financial Abuse, Community Stories. I wasn't supposed to be here. The woman who was scheduled to speak canceled last minute, and someone on the organizing committee called me after hearing my name mentioned through legal channels. "We know it's short notice," she'd said, "but would you be willing to share your story?" I said yes, without asking who had volunteered my name. So there I was, under the humming fluorescent lights of the East Side Community Center, holding a manila folder I'd stopped labeling weeks ago. It didn't need a title anymore. I knew what it held. I knew who I was. I walked to the front and adjusted the microphone, though it didn't need much. My voice didn't shake, my hands didn't fidget, but I still took a breath before speaking. "I gave everything," I began. Then I was told I owed more. A few people nodded. One woman closed her eyes, like she'd heard her own life echoed in that single line. I didn't name names. I didn't shame anyone. I told the truth. Just the facts. Dates, transfers, changes in legal documents, the phone call that shifted everything. I spoke about the day my key stopped working, the way silence grew between people who once called me Mom. I told them how the story had been rewritten without me, and how I chose not to disappear, but to document. The worst theft wasn't money, I said, looking directly at the row where no one met my eyes. It was identity. A few people clapped. Most didn't, But I saw something stronger than applause. Tears. One woman in the back whispered, "That was my story too." And that was enough. Weeks passed. In late May, I stood under a gray sky at a small funeral for a cousin I hadn't seen in years. The chairs were damp from a passing drizzle. Someone handed me an umbrella I didn't use. As I stood near the edge of the crowd, a relative I barely knew leaned close and asked, "Haven't seen Travis around. You two patch things up?" I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. "He and I live on different truths now," I said simply. Then I turned before more could be asked. Back at home that evening, I watered the plants on my windowsill, little pockets of life that didn't ask for explanations. They'd bloomed more this spring than any other. I didn't take credit. I just kept showing up. On the bookshelf beside the window sat 2 framed photos. One of the house, faded and bent at the edges, taken in a better season. The other, a watercolor I'd painted of my studio apartment's kitchen. It wasn't art gallery material, but it was mine. I leaned in and whispered to the empty room. I lost my title, but I reclaimed my name. Some wounds don't close, but they don't bleed forever. This is the end of what they wrote. What I write next is mine. I've learned that sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom holding its breath. I spent too many years believing that love meant giving everything and asking for nothing. But now I know boundaries are not betrayal, and walking away isn't quitting, it's surviving. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, please hear me when I say, your worth is not measured by how much you give until there's nothing left. You matter, and it's never too late to reclaim your story. What about you? Have you ever been pushed aside by the people you thought would stand beside you forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation. If this video touched your heart, comment 1 below, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't, I still want to hear from you. Why not? What didn't land for you? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Someone's truth might just become your turning point.